Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. I'm going to stop saying that every scene that I analyze in Hyouka is one of my favorites. Even if it's true, you can just assume from here on out that if I'm breaking down the specifics of a scene, that I like it a lot. With that said, and as you could gather from the title, we're breaking down the Café scene from episode 3 today, with a little bit of setup from episode 2. And this Café scene should be the standard for how to do sequences of two people talking to each other over a table. If you're interested in how to make a sequence that is normally visually unstimulating, stimulating, then this is a pretty clear outline. The number of inventive shots, like this shot using a mirror, these high angles to break the monotony of just two people talking back and forth, is great. It keeps the viewer much more engaged visually, which is important because the conversation that takes place here is the groundwork for the Sekitani June mystery, which I spoke about already, so you can go check that out if you're so inclined. I said at the end of that video that I wanted to talk about time, and this Café is the perfect place to do that, as you probably could have guessed by the title of this video. Time is signposted as something to keep in mind even before we get to the Café, as the date and time is posted on the phone that Hotaro goes to answer. And as we cut to the Café, we're greeted by 4 clocks and a watch, as Hotaro comments that Chitanda is late. Literally, time could not be more signposted if Hyouka stuck a giant sign behind Hotaro saying time is important. It kind of does do that, because the next shot is of another clock hanging over his head. Hotaro is very cognizant of time, specifically how he's currently wasting it by waiting for Chitanda to arrive, almost as though it's a specter hanging over his head. This becomes even more clear when Chitanda evades the discussion that she herself wants to have, and Hotaro begins to leave, stating that he can't afford to waste his precious day off. He specifically states playing the fool, which is a nice callback to this previous shot of clowns and gets more interesting later in the show when tarot cards come into the discussion, and a later arc. Also, in case you needed more reinforcement about the type of people they are, just look to their cups. Hotaro is drinking coffee, presumably black by the residue, while Chitanda has some fancy creamy thing going on, I'm guessing hot chocolate. On top of that, Hotaro's cup and saucer are plain white, while Chitanda's have flowers on them, which is good setup for when the whole scene suddenly takes on a rose-colored shade after Chitanda states, for a pretty great cliffhanger, that she's making a kind of confession. The camera angles and slight shake to the lens, compared to the pretty standard and steady shots we had prior, do a good job of matching how off-balance that statement has made Hotaro. And before we go into the end credits, we get this shot of ice shifting to show that exact change. Episode 3 kicks off with this literal rose-tinted shade. Everything is saturated out of its mind. The light coming from outside has washed out the window shades, the pendulum on the clock has changed from round to heart-shaped, it's gone to the extreme. Every little sound almost echoes, from the tick of the clock to Chitanda's breathing. Hotaro is in a state of total focus, which reaches its apex when time literally stops, with just the two of them for a brief moment. This is the deepest rose-colored shade we've seen so far, which makes sense, since the evidence suggests that this is a romantic moment. Or at the very least, that's how Hotaro has interpreted Chitanda's statement. Hotaro asks the waiter for more coffee as we zoom in to Chitanda, who begins to speak, and Hotaro tenses up, eyes wide, the heart-shaped pendulum suddenly ticking louder as though it's his heart beating. And as Chitanda goes for the big favor ask, we suddenly snap out of the rose tint and zoom way out from Hotaro's perspective, showing that he was intensely focused on Chitanda at that moment. As we cut to this perpendicular angle, we see the pendulum is back to normal, and Hotaro is stunned. Twice. Presumably first because of the request by Chitanda, and also secondly the snap back to reality. A quick look over to the waiter from Hotaro's perspective begins to ask the question of, was that real? The next sequence is great. We get Chitanda right aligned in this shot, followed by Hotaro left aligned, Chitanda centered, them on opposite sides with the center empty, and then the pendulum centered. It's just a good way to string shots together, because it keeps things visually interesting, keeps the eyes moving and taking in more of the scene, makes the utilization of empty space actually engaging as opposed to just empty space, and the material we get post-opening is more of that exact same stuff. We cut to the man reading the newspaper with a line about a Japanese man going missing, a pan over a sign for the Kamiyama festival, which are both good foreshadowing, and the newspaper also brings us into the storybook aesthetic for the flashback, with a match cut to bring us back out into reality. As Chitanda tells the background of the Sekitani June mystery, we get great shots like this one, where she's small in the frame as she talks about her younger self crying, and these shots which focus on her eyes as she asks these questions, a reminder of her curiosity. Hotaro is basically forced to look away from the intensity by which she cares about these things, as the coffee that he ordered comes over. It's been about 4 minutes since he ordered that coffee, with the OP even coming through to build in more time. So this is just a subtle reminder that everything that happened in that rose tint was actually happening. His feelings and actions in that space were real. The emotional intensity of that moment was real. Hotaro asks why Chitanda is asking him, and she replies that he's found answers to other things in the past, mentioning specifically the silk spider flyer, which makes him super uncomfortable and he has to look away. As we zoom away from her, it's already clear that Hotaro is pulling away, that he's going to say no even before she asks. He doesn't make eye contact with her as he softly says no, before she pushes forward regardless, her eyes making up about 40% of the screen, before harshly getting shot down by just Hotaro's mouth. Still no eyes. It goes back to the first episode where he gets absorbed into her world by her eyes. He's almost powerless when it comes to them. Hotaro rationalizes that he shouldn't take responsibility for something that could affect her entire outlook on life, especially because he'd need to find the truth, not just an acceptable answer. As he tells her to use force of numbers, therefore underplaying his own ability, he's also small in the frame, as though he's trying to shrink away from this favor. Chitanda gets real and says that this isn't something that she can tell just anyone, which makes Hotaro feel a bit self-conscious of the fact that she was looking to him for assistance, and he pretty rudely brushed her off for something that was legitimately difficult for her to tell him. It also plays into making him feel special, but that's a discussion for a later arc. Chitanda hasn't had a sip of her drink, compared to Hotaro, who's been making his way through his second one, which is notable because it's a good mark for who's been speaking the most. We then make our way to the discussion of how this is a time-sensitive matter, with a cut to the clock again to signal that, again, time is important. Hotaro says that she has plenty of time to remember, which isn't true. And then, as Chitanda explains and then apologizes, we cut to Hotaro within the light bulbs of this light fixture, which properly sets up the sandbox illusion, as he's in the same location and looking at Chitanda, who's digging aimlessly. And after Hotaro tells Chitanda his terms, he picks up his cup to see that it's empty. The first clock we see puts the time at around 1:27 p.m. And since he's been waiting and Chitanda is late, let's just assume they agreed to meet at 1:25 p.m. The last clock we see puts the time at 2:45 p.m. That's an hour-plus long conversation, as opposed to the opening where it's clear Hotaro was cognizant of every moment. His grasp on time clearly faded. Time even stopped for a moment during the confession and then dilated as the talk continued. This is a very subtle hint that Hotaro is a bit more rose-colored than he might have thought, as time blows by when it's just the two of them. Time is the reason why Chitanda forgot her uncle's words. Time is the reason why Chitanda needs to remember. But these moments of the two of them talking, even if it's not particularly fun, go by so quickly like youth tends to do. So this moment in the cafe is a reminder of the nature of time, and to make the most of it. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like or a comment with your thoughts on the cafe scene. Next time we'll be tackling the 2 biking scenes from episodes 4 and 5, so subscribe if you want to know when that goes live. Follow us on Twitter for updates, link in the description, or until next time, thanks for watching.